Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Extravagant Trade Group. This is your end of day market recap for what is today, Tuesday the 27th. So let's get into today's price action, which was a little bit dull. It seems like we are waiting for some big earnings reports. Of course, NVIDIA reports tomorrow after the close. A lot of people seem to be really kind of hooked on what that name is going to do. I get it. It will affect a lot of stocks. And I think it will be an important report for that group, for the semis, a little bit of tech, and there's just the overall AI theme. So, I'm kind of up in the air a little bit about what that name is going to do. I think that they have a good earnings report, but I don't know if they're going to have a huge reaction to the upside because I think a lot is priced in. That's what I think for now, but I hope that I'm downplaying it, and I hope they do have a really good report because it will get exciting if they do. Risk disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. So I mentioned it will get a little bit more exciting, and it's been pretty dull. Because overall, when you look at what the groups that are just straight up trending, it's a lot of what we call low or minimum volatility, depending on what ETF you use. SPLV is an example. I'll get there. I wanted to go over the indices too, just to kind of show you, first of all, like, it's just, to me, and I listened to somebody say this earlier. I think it was Dennis over at Benzinga was talking about, that some of the best traders out there, they don't make market calls. They follow their system, and they have a really good system, and they work on their system to make it better. But this is exactly like a perfect example of this. For the last week, the S&P has basically just been consolidating. Now, of course, we've done things like we've looked at the RSP, the equally weighted S&P 500. I'm not going to do that in this video because I've done that now basically since last week. I've been bringing up that chart and talking about how there's more participation than just what's going on in the S&P 500 because it's market cap weighted. But you could see we're kind of stuck here. This 5660 spot 50, right? And I know some people look at gamma levels, or they look at the every 100 points for the S&P, but this nailed it, right? It's telling you where volume at price. It's basically this box is based on last month's volume at price, and roughly one standard deviation of all that activity, and it's giving you a perfect resistance level based on that volume. So yeah, it's important. I do this too. I'll draw trend lines too, but you wouldn't probably have known that otherwise, unless you have the MarketWebs on your screen, right? And that's the same thing versus NVIDIA too. Now, it's not perfect. NVIDIA is kind of, and I have a trend line drawn in here, but look at it, it's the same thing. It's oscillating right around that top of the value area. And again, you wouldn't know where that was, other than I don't know another tool without using volume at price in this manner would give you that. And by the way, look at the VPOC on the lows, right? That was perfect, right? So again, I'm not, sometimes people think like, oh, you drew that in there. I'm not drawing that in there. That's based on the volume profile. That's based on the point of control for every value area. And if price does not go through that point of control during that given period, then what happens is a blue line automatically gets drawn, all right? And there was one down in here too, off of this point of control, right? So again, price has to pass through those point of controls. If not, we draw forward a virgin a line forward through that point of control, and it becomes what's called the virgin point of control. So that's where we are right now. Is we stopped right here, and again, I use this. I didn't trade. I don't think I trade the absolute low in NVIDIA. I think I got long in here, and I just played it through the value area. So anyway, I'll move on. But that's the main event for tomorrow. There's going to be some other earnings reports, I think, that are also going to be very interesting. Like a firm is going to report tomorrow after the close tomorrow. And I like this chart. I think it's trying to bottom out here. It's still below the 200-day moving average, but sometimes you can kind of get a sense of what's going on in a name by looking at the group. Now, the name still has to execute, and they still have to be doing as well as their peers, but take a look at what happened in MasterCard today, right? MasterCard is moving higher, right? And moving, since speaking of a version point of control, there's one right in here. And that's because that was drawn automatically because there was no overlap between these value areas and this point of control. But to move on, also Visa's moving up. And there's also a version point of control up here, which I would be willing to take profits. So you've got a couple names that are perking up, and that Visa almost looks a little bit similar to the Affirm chart. Another one that I like to look at is what's AXP, which is also now closer to moving on. Now, there's also another theme at play, and I'm going to get to that theme in just a second, but and I've already kind of hinted at it. But by the way, here's PayPal, and I know a lot of people are very bullish PayPal, but PayPal stopped right at the overhead supply, virgin point of control. And I actually put this trade idea out months ago to go long PayPal, the reason why I have the second target in there is that's the top of the value area for the year, and that's where that's coming from. But at the very least, if you followed along here, you got a very nice target in here, and now it's either in some consolidation or it's going to revert back. But again, overhead supply, sellers, basically halted that thing right where it was. So I like that name. So besides NVIDIA reporting tomorrow, it's going to be a number of other names that are going to be interesting. CrowdStrike's another one, Salesforce, and I'm not looking to play a couple of those names. I'm just looking to basically see what they say about the industry, and that may lead to some opportunities going forward. I talked about the S&P, the Qs. Very interesting too when you look at the 1 hour. So sorry, I'm jumping ahead here, but we're holding in here, and I even thought that we might break down a bit here, but no breakdown. We're holding above this flat line, which is the 50-day moving average, and we're holding inside the value area for the month. So while it's been in this very short term, don't get mad at me because people get mad at me when I say things like this, but in the very short term, meaning like just over the last week and a half, it's been showing some relative weakness because there's been a lot of things that are going straight up, and the Qs are not one of them. The semiconductors had a little bit of a nice move back today. Again, I've been talking about, since this is kind of a little bit of again, it's not a sideways chart per se, but it's not breaking higher and it's below its 50-day moving average. But the semis did what yesterday? I think I brought this up earlier. The semis SMH was down 2.3%, so it bounced today. It was up 1% today, and it was one of the best performing groups for today, because you just didn't have a lot of names that had big upside moves today. IHI medical devices were up 0.75%, but that's it. You didn't have any other group up 1% today, and there were a few more groups that were to the downside. You could see that the cryptos were down over 1%. Home builders were down 1%. Clean energy stocks were down 1%. Energy stocks were down more than 1%. So again, the breadth, as I had pointed out here, was a little bit weaker today, like not huge weaker. So I should really write that in there. A little weaker today. Whoops. A little weaker today. Ugh, I still can't. I still can't. Sometimes I have this problem late in the day. There we go. A little weaker today. So I mentioned, with the Qs showing a little bit of relative weakness over the last week, they haven't been going up. But what has been amazing me is just the low volatility trade. And I've been talking about this to some extent. If you've been watching my videos over the last week, you know that I point out where I see strength in the market, and that's been in the consumer staples. That's been in the utilities. That's been in healthcare, XLV. That's been in financials, XLF. It's also been in insurance things. But yeah, this is what's called a low volatility ETF. But do you see what I mean? Like, and again, I'm not trying to say anything bad about the Qs here, but they've been doing this to the downside, and low volatility stocks, dividend names, things of that nature, have just been going vertical and staying above this 5-period moving average. So I'll go through, I'll bring these up like all within 5 seconds. Consumer staples, and just watch this 5-period moving average, right? Look at this, after already in an uptrend, just taking another leg higher. I mentioned XLF, the financials, same thing. They're just gliding up like this, right? And then, of course, XLV, which is healthcare. Also, notice where the 5-period moving average is. All of these, and again, it's tough to really. The point that I was making earlier, when I was talking with Joel from Benzinga, he does a closing print on YouTube, and these are not the easiest things to trade, because while this is staying above the 5-period moving average, you're not going to make huge gains in something like this. 153 to 155 for the overall ETF. You kind of have to pick some individual names in this group. But again, all I'm doing is just showing you where the strength. The insurance group has been so strong. And again, a lot of these, why I spend time on this in these end of day videos is because I don't think everybody's talking about this. I see like every once in a while, like somebody will come on CNBC and talk about the consumer staples, but it's not just the consumer staples. It's things like insurance companies. And some of these, I traded this one a couple of weeks ago. I didn't think it was going to rocket off like this, but look at Progressive, for example, right? And I am long some names in the group, like I'm long Berkshire Hathaway, which made a new high today. So very strong there. Also look at the VPOC reversal off of this one, but you go up and down, and Allstate's another one making a new high today. But I could literally go through 15 of these things, and there's a lot of small cap names too, small cap insurers too. They're all breaking out. I mean, it's pretty tremendous. How strong the insurers have been, and now for weeks. I've talked about aerospace and defense. Those are still at it, and I'm long some. It's tough to buy something up this much, but I did buy a little bit of LMT, right? And then of course, some of the food stocks, and Walmart kind of fits the mode right now of low volatility, and it's also happening a bit in tech. Look at IBM. Right? IBM has just been straight up too, right? Just a lower volatility, and it is an AI. It's low volatility AI, but this is where the money is kind of going into for now. Is the market, or I say the market, but it's usually funds that are driving this. They don't want volatile names right now, and that could be because of the election, that could be because of the summertime. But these groups are doing really well now. You may ask me, as someone did on Twitter, they're like, oh, they're kind of extended. I agree, they are extended, but I'm just telling you where these things are. So you want to kind of just have an open mind, on some things that are going up. And I mentioned Visa and MasterCard. Those are kind of new, that are moving to the upside. Here's another one, Sprouts Market, right? So very, very strong, some of these groups. So the bottom line here is that we'll see if earnings changes things. Software has been very quiet too. And again, a lot of these things made a nice run. They just didn't make it to the highs, right? So again, when we talk about leadership, it's basically, if I view leadership as, so many names have come back from the lows from a couple of weeks ago, but it's really, to me, whether or not that group has taken out the July highs. And if it hasn't, then it's not exhibiting leadership. You could find individual names, of course, in the group, but I'm just talking about overall groups, because I always start with that approach. I always start with, hey, where's your market leadership right now? And right now the leadership is in your lower volatility areas, as I illustrated, and everything else you could just be quicker with, right? I was in Upstart, right, which I really like the setup in this, but I'm going to take it off when it hits a VPOC. And I took that off here. And that's something, somebody asked me on Twitter yesterday. They seemed very angry, but I said, because some of these names you don't have to be in for that long. Like, you don't have to be married to the trade. And that's the funny thing about Twitter, is people think you're married to a name or to a trade. And I was like, buddy, because somebody was giving me a hard time about Wingstop, and I was like, I'm already out of it. I'm sorry. Like, So you could try to get mad at me, because you don't like the name, but like, I'm already out of it. I got my price target. So that's another way, like, that I'm kind of thinking about some of these names where just the major momentum isn't there. And as I just illustrated with IGV, you have to be a little bit more strategic with this. And look at IGV, went right up to the top of the value area. So when things have resistance in front of them, you can either just take the trade off and then just begin to kind of watch, right? Or you could take a good chunk of the profits off and then go from there, because I think a lot of these things that really got beaten up, it's just it's too large of a move for many of them to go out and make it to new highs, and they kind of stalled out it with that overhead supply. So I think it will be really interesting tomorrow for earnings, but I think that there's also a number of other earnings reports to go on, and we'll see if that changes. I think at this point, some of those lower volatility names, I think there's still opportunities, and I think Visa and MasterCard are two opportunities, and that might set up. A firm will be a name that I'll be trading for earnings. We'll go from there. Another name that I like too, that is more growth, is Melly. Now I know this is a name that's in need of a stock split, but that's a nice break higher for Melly, and we've been watching this name since it reported earnings, but that breaks it out to new highs there in Melly. So I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.